Tashkent, the city's age is impressive, 2,210 years. An impressive time period, without a doubt, left its mark on all spheres of life of this city, on its culture, religion, and history, and of course, on the architectural appearance of the capital of Uzbekistan. For centuries in the East, the Bazaar has been the heart of every city. Tashkent was not an exception. Many centuries ago, it became an important trading center in Central Asia. We are located in one of the oldest and the most central bazaar of the city of Tashkent, which is called Chorsu, which is translated from the Persian language as Chor is four and Su is a road. That is, four roads, the intersection of roads. It was a place to where all merchants arrived from all surrounding cities, regions, in order to engage in trade, to bring their goods. An exchange took place here. In other words, it has its roots in ancient times, and it continued in the Middle Ages. Over the centuries, the bazaar became the center of the economic life of the surrounding land. Residential houses were built. New streets appeared around the bazaar. By its significance, Chorsu ceases to be just a place for sale. In the Middle Ages, for example, the bazaar was not intended only for trade. Every self-respecting man had to go to the bazaar at least once. Every day it was necessary to go to the bazaar. For example, the elderly people who no longer worked, they had to go to the bazaar to find out the latest news. So bazaar in Central Asia, in particular in Uzbekistan, has been and remains today the central place where trading life, business life, secular life take place. The location of the Great Silk Road contributed to the transformation of both Chorsu Bazaar and the whole of Tashkent into one of the key points on the route of Eurasia's largest trade route. Merchants bring weapons, fabrics, utensils, tea, and rice for sale, as well as spices which in the Middle Ages were literally worth its weight in gold. All the spices that could be bought in India, all the spices that could be bought in China, respectively, were all sold here. At every point of this Great Silk Road, here we also have our own spices.
You can imagine, like, perhaps these cities, like, let's say, 500 years ago, when there were active Silk Road posts, and perhaps you can see all the markets and all the merchants doing their things, selling their products from China, from India, from Venice, from Persia, and so active, and the streets full of products, full of food, full of life. You know, you can feel this, and it's very, very, very beautiful.
Fernando from Buenos Aires traveled to Tashkent for several months. Why so long? He simply decided to repeat the Silk Road route and use the vehicles available in our century as rarely as possible.
I'm doing a long journey around the Silk Road. I started 6 months ago in Barcelona. And well, I arrived to Uzbekistan 15 days ago. I was in Kazakhstan and I crossed. And I reached Nukus in Karakalpakstan, in the western part of Uzbekistan. And then I went to Khiva, Bukhara, Samarkand, and now I am in Tashkent.
An unusual traveler is held by complete strangers. He doesn't face any problems with such necessities as food, water, and shelter for an overnight stay. And also this approach gives time in order to enjoy the unique architecture of Uzbekistan.
I'm not specialist about architecture, but wow, you can really see, even if you don't know anything about, when you are in these kind of places, you feel like you are an ant, you know, because it's so big and it's so beautiful, and the details of the mosaics, like they really have a good
Hazrat Imam is in a certain sense a small town, a whole complex of architectural monuments that allows you to touch the history of Uzbekistan. Here are several buildings dating back to different eras, starting from the 10th century.
Сам комплекс Hazrat Imam входит мавзолей, входит...
The Hazrat Imam complex itself includes a mausoleum, includes the Hamazgoh Mosque, Barak Khan Madrasa, Imamu Barak Madrasa, Tilya Sheikh Mosque, and the modern building that was built in 2007, which is called the Hazrat Imam Mosque.
которая была построена в 2007 году, так и называется Hazrat Imam.
The complex was named in honor of the theologian, preacher, and scholar, one of the first Imams, Abubakr Muhammad Kafal Shoshi. After his death, a mausoleum was erected over his grave, which eventually became a holy place for Muslims.
Первый мавзолей Abubakr Shoshi.
The first mausoleum of Abubakr Shoshi was erected after his death in 978, but that building did not reach us. That is, the building that you see now has been constructed in the 16th century. After that, the building was destroyed. Some part of it was rebuilt. And the roof, the dome part, were already built in the 18th, 19th centuries. Some parts of it were repaired. Some were finally completed.
Что-то достроено.
In the immediate vicinity of the mausoleums of Abubakr Shoshi is the Namazgoh Mosque. Scientists cannot yet agree on an exact answer when it was originally built. In its present form, it is a 19th century building, but archaeological excavations unequivocally testify that the mosque was built on the site of another temple.
Здание было построено в 19 веке, но...
The building was built in the 19th century, but it was built on the ruins of Namazgoh Mosque, which previously stood here. The latter, the first mosque, was built when the mausoleum of Abubakr Shoshi was built. The building has a rectangular shape, stretched in length. In the center, there is a winter hall. On the sides, there are rooms for worshippers.
По бокам помещение для молящихся.
In the second half of the same 19th century, Tashkent became part of the Russian Empire. The population of the city grew rapidly, many new streets and buildings appeared, and over time, even their own unique architectural style was formed. It is Turkestan colonial style, or Turkestan modernism, as it is sometimes called. Buildings made of brown-gray brick, not plastered. But due to the fact that it does not require plastering, it allows for making a figured layout. And this figured layout adorns not only Tashkent, but also many buildings of Turkestan style. One of the samples of Turkestan Art Nouveau is considered to be a building located in the so-called New City, an area formed at the junction of the 19th and 20th centuries. There are many banks in Tashkent, and there were many. After all, it was an important trade center of Central Asia, but the most respected was the Tashkent branch of the Imperial State Bank. It was organized here back in the 70s, but in a rented building. The bank is a serious matter, and the need to build a special building which would be protected from robbery arose. It was built in Tashkent in 1895.
в 1895 году.
The author of the project was Wilhelm Heinzelmann, at that time an assistant to the Turkestan Governor-General for the construction. Many buildings of Tashkent were built under his leadership. He also developed standards for anti-seismic construction, which are applied to this day. A lot has still remained in the same state as it was more than 100 years ago. In recent years, the banking community of our city of Tashkent decided to create a banking museum here and succeeded in this. Last year, both state and private bankers opened this museum in a solemn ceremony. However, it's still impossible to consider this building a museum in the full sense of the word. Today, there is a branch of one of the banks in Uzbekistan. The construction is carefully preserved almost in its original form and still serves its purpose.
Эта дверь, вот, можете даже здесь год написано, 1853
This
год.
door, it has even a year, 1853 written on it. It was made in St. Petersburg and installed here. So far, all this is in working order. We open and close it every day. Everything works fine. You can see how thick the door is, and it's still in good shape. Everything is working. Here you can lock it. Every day it opens and closes.
Каждый день открывается и закрывается.
Of course, many accessories inherent in that era are not needed in the realities of the modern financial market. For example, a lift for bags of money or a press for official documentation. Therefore, they were sent on an honorary vacation, turning into museum exhibits. But not everything has changed. In Uzbekistan, they respect their history.
Кафель, то, что на полу,
The tile, the one on the floor, is preserved in the original state. To specifically know the difference, a new one was made here, and the one nearby, what surrounds it, is the original.
который окружает его, вот это оригинал.
Another example of Turkestan style is Westminster University of Tashkent. Built at the beginning of the 20th century, the building was originally designed for an educational institution, however of a slightly different nature. It was built from the very beginning by Georgy Mikhailovich Svarichevsky in 1915 for the second Tashkent Women's Gymnasium. In Tashkent, there were not enough places for girls to study because they were not accepted into either the real school, the cadet corps, the railway school, or the commercial school. And there were a lot of girls, from officials, the military families, and so on. One gymnasium was not enough. An important part of this building, and of many buildings in Tashkent in general, was that at the design stage of the project, the architects used any possible means to ensure that the structure was as solid and stable as possible.
Интересно, что пристенные контрафорсы в
It is
зданиях
interesting that wall buttresses and buildings in Tashkent have not only a decorative role, as has been done in many cities of Russia, they also have an amplifying role. Undoubtedly, the architect took into account the seismicity of Tashkent and strengthened the building with these buttresses so that it could withstand an earthquake.
этими контрафорсами здания, чтобы оно выстояло при землетрясении.
The Bolshoi Theater, named after Alisher Navoiy, is a construction of a later period. Work on the project began in 1939, but soon because of the Second World War, the construction had to be stopped.
Этот театр был построен в 48
This theater was built in 1948, but the project began even before the war in the late 1930s. A competition was announced and many projects participated in this competition, but the famous architect Alexei Shushev, known as the author of the Lenin Mausoleum, won.
Алексей Щусев, известный как автор мавзолея Ленина.
In Tashkent, he designs the Alisher Navoiy Theater.
Здание, оно представляет собой классический европейский
The building is a classic European theater structure. That is, it's about the same as the Hall of La Scala or the Vienna Opera. To decorate the interior of the theater, the best artists of Bukhara, Samarkand, Khiva, and the Fergana Valley were invited. According to the architects, each of the 6 sidelines surrounding the concert hall was supposed to reflect the unique features of all regions of the country. National ornaments can be seen here. A lot of craftsmen, architects from Uzbekistan worked here. And it has such a national flavor. It's an opera house, but perhaps does not look like other theaters in the post-Soviet space. The construction of the theater began in 1944 when there were no doubt about the imminent victory of the Red Army. However, the Second World War once again intervened in the fate of the construction. Captured Japanese from the Kwantung Army, who were deported to Tashkent in 1945, took part in the final part of the construction of this theater. The theater has been named after the great poet Alisher Navoyi in 1966. During his work on stage, without exaggeration, all the best works of world classics were staged: Aida, Rigoletto, Boris Godunov, Prince Igor, Spartacus, Don Juan, Romeo and Juliet, to satisfy the most sophisticated taste. There are some special parts that you especially like. One of these parts is Mephistopheles from Faust opera. The 1960s of the last century marked the beginning of a kind of a golden age in the architecture of the USSR. The main style is Soviet modernism, a direction that has virtually no analogues in the world. Tashkent does not stand aside. Panoramic cinema, a unique building of the style, also appeared in the capital of Uzbekistan.
Это здание было совершенно новой вехой в архитектурной жизни.
This building was a completely new landmark in the architectural life of Tashkent. It revived a completely new direction of Soviet modernism in our city.
Новое направление советского модернизма в нашем городе.
Out of 3 developed options, the author's team settled down on the round shape of the main hall. The Roman Doric capital was taken as a sample, more precisely, its slice. The construction of the largest panoramic cinema in Central Asia began in 1962 and ended in 1964, and 2 years later the building passed, probably its most important test. A test by the natural elements.
В 1966 году при сильном землетрясении это было
In 1966, when there was a strong earthquake, this building was the only cinema theater that survived and retained its full volume. This was due to the fact that there was a prefabricated structure inside, which was made of separate reinforced concrete panels, which was then assembled, and the ceiling itself was made of steel beam-shaped structures, which were fixed in the center.
которые в центре закреплялись.
A few years later, the construction of the subway began in Tashkent. At that time, it was the first subway in Central Asia.
В 70-е годы прошлого века
In 1970s of the last century, the population of Tashkent reached the level of almost 2 million people, and the city clearly needed a good transport structure. And it was decided to build the Tashkent Metro.
Ташкентского метрополитена.
The location of Tashkent in a seismically dangerous region was one of the problems metro builders faced. At that time, the city was only recovering from the devastating earthquake of 1966, so everything was done with regard to the safety of the subway.
Каждая станция метро длиной около 100 метров.
Each metro station is about 100 meters long, and divided into 3 parts. Here we can see the seismic shafts, which ran all the way around the station. It is even on the ceiling. Here is the dome. It cuts it. We can clearly see how the dome is cut. What for it has been made. When there will be tremors or some kind of movement, these 33+ meter structures won't move. They will be fixed in one place as they are.
3 с лишним метра, они не сдвигаются. Они вот как есть, они будут фиксированными.
The first metro line in Tashkent was opened in 1977. The design of the stations was taken very seriously. The main emphasis was placed on the national style, honed for centuries by masters of Uzbekistan.
Каждый купол здесь абсолютно индивидуален, ни один узор не повторяется.
Each dome here is completely individual. Not a single pattern is repeated. Glazed ceramics, glass elements, and gold leaf are used. Granite and Gazgan marble are used in the elements of the columns, on the floors. It is our local granite. Gazgan is a small town where the marble is produced and mined.
Газган – это небольшой городок, в котором производится, вот именно добывается наш мрамор.
Almost every metro station of Tashkent is truly a work of art. The design is not repeated, corresponding to the name of the station.
Станция метро космонавтов, она разрабатывалась в институте.
Astronauts metro station was developed at the institute where I worked, and I know the authors of the station's design very well. I know how it was all designed, what difficulties they encountered.
Все проектировалось, с какими сложностями, с какими трудностями сталкивалось.
Unlike other stations which mainly used elements of folk art and samples of authentic architecture, they wanted to make this one more modern. Therefore, a group of young architects was chosen for decoration.
Очень интересное решение боковых стен этой станции. Они были решены как своеобразные.
They used very interesting solution on the side walls of the station. They look like some kind of windows. In these windows, our famous artist Bahadur Jalalov made murals of those wonderful people whose names were associated with space, starting from Copernicus and ending with Tereshkova.
Начиная от Коперника и кончая Терешковой.
The 1980s were also marked by the appearance of a number of buildings in the architectural landscape of the Uzbek capital, which to this day attract the attention of European urban planners. It was at that time that the residential complex called Pearl was built in Tashkent. It was an example of the so-called Soviet constructivism.
Тогда именно настал момент реформ именно в архитектуре.
It was the moment of reforms in architecture. Until the end of 1970s, architects usually concentrated on construction based on the style of the building. Modern style, modernism, and that's it. And after the 1970s, many architects began to write articles about the traditions of Uzbekistan, Tashkent, the Uzbek people, and so on. In a short period of time, a symbiosis from modern architectural traditions and our national traditions was born.
И наших традиций.
Residential complex Pearl was built in 1985 by the architect Afilia Aydinova. It became the first example of a reinforced concrete apartment building in Tashkent. In addition, the creators tried to implement the traditional architecture of Uzbekistan for urban communities, the so-called mahalia, in a 16-story building.
И вот именно тут можно наглядно посмотреть на ту атмосферу.
It is from here that you can visually see an atmosphere, a recreational zone, which the architect tried to create. The zone serves as a courtyard. We call it hovli. And the main principle of this design is the courtyard, ayvan, and an apartment. This method is often used in the design of suburban residential buildings when a person enters his yard, then ayvan, and then his apartment respectively. So she tried to imitate this process in a multi-story residential building.
этот процесс в этом многоэтажном жилом доме.
Over its more than 2,000 history, Tashkent went through a difficult path, from a small village to one of the largest and most beautiful cities in Central Asia. The capital of Uzbekistan has preserved its unique image, largely due to the fact that its residents cherish their architectural monuments.